Todd. This is my talk on amateur radio. You probably think I didn't put a lot of effort into this, and that's because there was a premise that if there were enough talks, there would be a conference, and if there was a conference, there'd be free pizza. So transitive property, now there's a talk. But this isn't totally wrong. This is a little bit what my life is like. Wood paneling from the 70s in my basement, saying things that people don't understand half the time when I say them, that's part of it. So first I want to talk about like why radios, because some of you are like, you know, I've got Spotify, like I'm all good. I don't need a radio when the internet exists. And I'm like, no, you can like talk back to people too. And you're like, oh, like a cell phone. And like, okay, you got me, all right. But what I'll say is that depends on trillions of dollars of other people's fragile infrastructure. And if you're anything like me, you'd rather have like thousands of dollars of your own fragile infrastructure. So, and it's a fun hobby, right? Like you can get out of the house, you can meet people, talk to people, do things. Maybe you have another hobby. That's fine. Everybody needs a hobby. But I think ham radio can enhance the hobbies that you already have. So let's take the case that you're into model railroading. Did you know that there is part of the airwaves that are all around us are dedicated for use for railroad companies? And you can actually tune into those and listen to railroad workers. And you can listen to the automated messages that are passed as trains pass these inspection things at high speeds. They get temperature reports on their wheels, and if they're having a derailment issue and all this other stuff is just out there for you to find and listen to. And you know, I'm an outside kind of guy, so I can go on top of a hill and talk to people with a portable radio, and it's all good. The other thing is that you're not limited in what you can do on the radio. You don't have to, you have a wide allocation of space in the spectrum that you can use if you're a ham radio operator, and you can even invent your own modes of operation. So you don't have to take something that's off the shelf and be like, well, this is all we've got. You can literally sit down at your workbench and make something new. You can publish a single page on your radio club's website and start using a new digital mode that nobody's ever heard of before. Like, you can do that. And so this is what I'm gonna keep coming back to, is we need to be more like this lady, like tinkering around, inventing and finding new things with the radio waves, which are like a common resource for all of us. We can do that. That's what the ham license really is. So that's why radio. Bottom line, you can innovate. So the next is how. Like, how do radios work? And I am not the person to talk to about that. Like, there's like antennas, and there's like stuff that comes out of them at parallel angle or at perpendicular angles, and it bounces, and like you can hear it. And I'm like, I remember when I made a tin can telephone to my treehouse, like that I understood. When you take the string away and it still works, like that's really cool. But the foundation of all radio is electromagnetic waves. That's like the light that we see is electromagnetic waves. Everything is. So if you've got, for example, if you've got like Bluetooth headphones, you know, that's radio. If you've got car clickers that can open, you know, these are my Bluetooth headphones. Like, look at that. That's radios underneath there. Two-way dimensional radios, like space-age technologies, man. And so that's like the first step of radio is like recognizing that you're already using it all the time, not just like tuning in broadcast radio, terrestrial broadcast radio, or even Sirius XM, like, which is cool because it's in satellites, right? Like that's a step up. But you've got Wi-Fi, you've got Bluetooth, you've got all these things that you're using on a daily basis, your garage door opener, right? All those things are for you. A lot of those live in parts of the spectrum that are called licensed by rule. And so when I talk about innovation, this is one of the things, like, you don't always have to have a license to do crazy, weird things. You just have to do it at like lower power so you can't disrupt everyone in your neighborhood. But like you have a lot of authority over the waves around your house. And so if you're asking, wow, this sounds really cool, I know you're not. But if you were, I would say like there are ways to progress your knowledge without committing yourself to a lot, right? So like one of the first things you can do is like recognize that every time you use Bluetooth, you're using a radio. You can, somewhere around here, I've got so many pockets. Oh, here we go. You can walk into Walmart and buy like off-the-shelf walkie-talkies. Like these use a different part of the spectrum that's licensed by rule called Family Radio Service. It's a half a watt. You can like, you know, give it to your kids or whatever. They're like playing on the monkey bars. You don't have to worry too much about them. Yeah, so like you can get a $30 dongle that plugs into your USB port of your computer, and you can like plot where airplanes are in the sky. You can listen in on the conversations that pilots are having with the ground crew. You can do all this cool stuff for very little investment and no licensing fee. And then once you get into like, okay, I'm ready to like get into a licensing fee, you can be like, okay, now I'm gonna go get like, an actual handheld radio with like a button I can push and talk to people, and it'll be like cool. And then you'll find the things that you can do to actually make that fun and worth your while. So there's like a progression. You don't have to jump into being tested and all this kind of stuff right away and getting your ham radio license. Just know that spectrum is all around you and it's yours for the taking. So the question of like, why should you get licensed versus like staying at these other exploratory stages of radio? And I think, number one, if you're ever pulled over for speeding in your UFO, you'd better have your license on you, just like any kind of getting pulled over. But really, it's about learning the etiquette and learning the safety rules, because it turns out at 2,000 watts, like, you can fry a lot of things. So safety rules and courtesy and understanding how to share spectrum efficiently and how to interface with other people who also want to use the same spectrum, right? Like, we have rules about how we integrate like internationally, how clubs in different regions set up their frequencies, things like this. And so when you actually go to get licensed, you need to talk to a VEC, which doesn't actually stand for Vapor Emission Commission, but I both like the way that sounds and thinking about what they might do if that were a real thing. But VEC actually stands for Volunteer Exam Coordinator. So when you want to get a radio license, a ham radio license, you talk to a volunteer examiner and they give you the test. And if you do poorly, shh, it's your little secret. They don't tell anybody. But if you pass, they will tell the FCC, and the FCC will say, congratulations, you've gotten a license, here's your call sign. You'll have like some letters and numbers that you can say when you talk to people on your radio. So that's cool. However, the first time you get licensed, it's probably like the little bitty baby license called the technician license. But that lets you operate things like this. You can put radios in your car. You can actually like put an external antenna on this and talk to the space station. Like, there are a lot of things you can do with that, but you can't really like propagate signals around the world. But you can, for example, talk to satellites that have repeaters on them that ham clubs have sent up like on their own dime, just so you can like make connections around the world. So satellites are pretty cool. And so if you get licensed and you get bored with just like tinkering with the radios and you actually want to have a purpose, like, there are things you can do to like deepen your experience in radio. One of those things is anytime there's a tornado made of fire, like, you should go help the people that are affected by that tragedy. Ham radio is one of the ways when that trillions of dollars of fragile infrastructure collapses, you can go set up a station, help do wellness checks, and make people help get contact with their families, do things like that. So emergency communications is what INCOMS means. There are these other acronyms that you don't have to worry about, but those are like types of clubs you can get in to go do these kinds of things. So it's easy to find people. Everybody's welcoming in the hobby. And then you're like, well, like, I like radios, but I like the world and space and all these other things. And I'm like, I got you. You can do something called Earth, Moon, Earth. You can time when the moon is going to be rising, bounce a radio signal off of it. Like 4 seconds later, somebody else can hear it, and they'll answer you back by bouncing their radio signal off the moon. You can do asteroid scatter when asteroids cross overhead, or where there's an aurora. All these things that are natural phenomenon have an impact on radio waves, and you can start to experiment and see how that changes who you can talk to around the world. One of the other things you can do, like I said, I like to get outdoors. If you're doing a trail race in the Red River Gorge where there's no cell phone signal, like, you might want somebody on the trail that can call back for help. Right? So that's one of the things you can do. They probably don't actually call it heart attack patrol, but I didn't know what they did call it, other than like, folks with radios that aren't fit enough to run. And now you can all go get your ham licenses because you can exchange memes over ham radios. I'm not making this up. Well, okay, so AI and me made this image up, but the fact that you can actually exchange memes over ham radio, like, that's legit. And if you're like, I'm not creative enough to make memes, like, don't worry, some of them exist. All you've got to do is like paste your call sign over top of them, write the letters CQ. Those are some of those like special meanings. Nobody understands what you mean, but like, and then send it out and see if anybody responds. And listen, the barrier for entry on these things is very low. All right, so don't think that if you want to go start spreading memes that it has to be clever. It doesn't. Just get started. Do the thing that you have fun with. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that it's possible to be creative in radio. I talked earlier about how you can innovate. Like, the spectrum is a shared resource for all of us, and you can innovate in that. So what I want to reinforce here is that like you can be creative in the ways that you use radio. And memes specifically are sent over a encoding mechanism called slow scan television. And so you know we're getting to the serious part of the talk because this is not an AI generated image or one that I stole from the internet. This is like, well, I stole it from the internet, but like it's actual, somebody sat down in front of a camera and took this photo. This is Cop Thorne McDonald. I do not recommend searching Cop McDonald, which is actually what he went by, but because you'll see the worst of humanity when cops at McDonald's are on the internet. But this is his amateur call sign. He has an SK after it. If you're like me and you grew up in the 90s on the internet and you're KEWL, when you thought people were neat, you're like, oh, it's cool that you gave him the moniker super cool because he invented the way to send memes. This actually means something much sadder. It is silent key. So he has passed away, so he can't send Morse code anymore. So we call people that have passed away silent keys. But here's the big reveal. Slow scan television came from the University of Kentucky. Not through some program, but just because Cop McDonald read a paper and said, hey, they're doing strange things with telephone lines in images. I bet I can do it over the radio. And he found a television screen that had a long phosphor, like a 7-second pause. So like once you put an image on it, it would last for, 7 minutes. And so with that, he was able to paint pixel at a time and transmit images that he took to make images like that were transmitted over radio. And so we've embellished on this a lot since then, but this is the thing that I wanted to say, like we're living in a cool place, and for the video, I don't know where the camera is, but we're at the University of Kentucky. That's the big reveal. And so going back to that idea of innovation and being at the technological frontier, I want to reinforce here that this radio service, if you look it up on the FCC, it says amateur radio service. It doesn't say expert or professional or any other kind of like credentialed bullcrap. Your test is like talking to your friends and they're like, yeah, I'll tell the FCC you passed it, or no, you need to give me another $5 and take it again, right? Like it's a very low barrier to entry way to start, using your technical chops and your creativity to make new things. And so this wasn't actually a conversation about ham radio at all. It was a conversation about being an amateur and finding those places where you can be creative and inventive and do the things without credentials, without a degree, without a career that make a difference to you and the people in your lives. And so even though Cop has passed away, his website is still online, and he ends with this von Goethe quote, which is, "Go and dare before you die." Thank you.